Hello, my name is Elle, and I am the host of a DID system called the Mage system. For a long time now, I have wanted to talk about lack of emotional object permanence and how that relates to DID and its formation. So that's what this video is going to be about. So firstly, I should start by defining and talking about what object permanence is separated from emotional object permanence, which we'll get into. Object permanence, from Wikipedia, because I don't know, I was lazy for the definition. Object permanence is the understanding that whether an object can be sensed has no effect on whether it continues to exist. Basically, this means that, say I have a ball and a drawer, and I show you the ball, you know it's there, and then if I put it in the drawer, you still know it's there even if you can't see it. Well, someone that has a lack of object permanence, whenever they can't see the ball, they think that it must not exist anymore. Anything that's not something they can sense in any way ceases to exist. This comes most into relevance whenever we're talking about children, because object permanence is not something that you're born with, but rather something that you learn whenever you're a young kid. Jean Piaget was the first psychologist to study object permanence in children. What he would do is he would take an infant, and then he would take the infant's favorite toy and show it to them. Then he would cover it with a blanket and observe their reaction. His conclusion was that by the age of 2, a child more or less has usually developed object permanence. This is why peekaboo is a thing that works with babies and young children, because whenever you cover your face up, they literally think you're just gone. So that's why it's amusing. And I'm sure that even though by the time a 2-year-old, once they turn 2, can sense that their favorite toy is still under the blanket, even though they can't see it, doesn't mean that their sense of permanence isn't still developing in some way, because it gets a lot more complex than just hiding a toy. Lack of emotional object permanence, on the other hand, is something that is mainly talked about in the psychology sphere concerning mental illness and with things like BPD, where whenever a person has BPD, they might feel a certain way about one person whenever they're present, like, oh, I love you, you are the love of my life, this person is so great, you're my best friend, you mean everything to me, you're the reason why I'm alive. Right? But whenever they have a few days away from that person and they forget what their interactions with them are like, they may start getting worried that that person actually hates them, or that person is actually a bad person and doesn't actually have their best interest in mind, and blah, 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 blah. And then they completely lose their conception of what that person is actually like whenever they're not there. Whenever that person is not right in front of them, their emotional knowledge of them ceases to exist anymore. Whenever people describe the formation of DID, they often go through the typical explanation of the theory of structural dissociation, which is a good explanation, but I feel like it gets overly regurgitated a bunch of times and not a whole lot of progress is made in terms of analyzing and theorizing why DID might be formed, or just expanding on it a little bit, because I still have a lot of unanswered questions. So I'm sure I've said it before and you're familiar that DID is thought to be just a bigger form of disorders like CPTSD and BPD, where there is emotional fragmentation in terms of one state of mind being drastically different from another. DID, it's just entirely different people, or, states of identity. So I was thinking about lack of emotional object permanence and combining that with your lack of object permanence as a child, and how you might lack emotional object permanence. Oftentimes you'll notice children, they'll be screaming in total distress 1 second, and then someone hands them a toy or something like that, and then all of a sudden they're the happiest person you've ever seen. So that seemed very pertinent to me and relevant to the formation of DID, because as we all know, children have ego states, one for doing one thing, one for doing another, because their brain, as I am thinking about it, can't handle that they experience all these different emotions together inside of one person. So their brain instead is just like, oh, this thing now, oh, this thing now, oh, this thing now. So say a child has a caregiver that is treating them in a way that would cause them to get a disorganized attachment style, meaning that sometimes they're very nice and loving and caring and raise children how they should be raised and meet their emotional needs. And then sometimes they are mean or just evoke a sense of fear or discomfort in the child, or sometimes they're neglectful or whatever. They just raise them in a disorganized way. This is where I think that lack of emotional object permanence in children would come into play in the formation of DID. This isn't an extremely new concept or anything, but I just think it's a new way of explaining a concept we're all familiar with that may help our understanding of it a little bit. And I'm not saying that I'm like 100% right about any of this. I'm kind of just throwing things out there because I'm just kind of bored a little bit. I think we should talk more and have more discussions about this. Basically, the child cannot process two things at the same time. The caregiver is making me feel safe in this way and unsafe in this way. Therefore, two banks of perception are created so that one can take advantage of the times that it feels safe for its own survival. Because if they were one and the same, and if the awareness was continual and the child was wholly emotionally cognizant of the danger the caregiver intermittently poses, then they would be fearful all the time because they wouldn't know whenever the caregiver would become dangerous. So they split into multiple awarenesses because the child needs to be able to trust their caregiver in order to have a sense of basic survival. They have to depend on them. Your parents are your world whenever you're a child. And being aware emotionally that they are a threat would disrupt your biologically wired need for safety. You know that unethical psychology 101 study they talk about with the cloth mother and the wire mother and the monkey, where I'm just regurgitating what I remember happening, but there's a monkey in a cage and there is two fake mothers. One of them is covered in cloth and one of them is made out of cold wire. Except the cold wire one dispenses milk for the monkey to drink, and the cloth mother does nothing but be made of cloth, right? The researchers would come in occasionally and shock the monkey or, scare it, actually. It might have been scaring it. I think it was just scaring it in some way, and see which one the monkey would run to. Would it run to the mother that provides them nutrients and food and keeps them alive? Or would it run to the mother that was warm and comforting? It ran to the mother that was warm and comforting. The child does not care if you are not providing its needs for survival in that way. A child needs a caregiver figure to function, even if that figure is abusive sometimes. And in order for it to survive and have that, it has to not know that caregiver is dangerous. Otherwise, it can't run to it whenever it needs safety. Continuing, the intense emotional experience of trauma is the object here in lack of object permanence. If a child is being hurt or put in danger in some way by their caregiver, just because they are dissociated from it and cannot sense the emotions does not mean that they are not there. Part of you experiences them and part of you doesn't. Because you are a young child and you lack a sense of object permanence, your brain cannot comprehend that the you that experiences these emotions and the you that is cut off from them are the same person. One must be the real you, which is probably going to be the one that's detached from the events, because the whole point of dissociation is to protect the everyday you from unwanted feelings or memories. It is not the initial dissociation itself that causes the disorder. It is the brain of a young child's interpretation of that dissociation that causes a divergence in consciousness. Very, very young children cannot understand the concept of dissociation and compartmentalization in the same way that an infant cannot understand that their mom still exists when she's not in the room. Sorry, my light died. Their thinking is too black and white to understand that two vastly different emotional states can be part of one identity. Thus, they develop as separate identities. Lack of emotional object permanence and emotional amnesia, which is basically amnesia for emotions you felt about something. So, for example, you could have total amnesia of a traumatic event where you don't remember what happened in the events, or you could have emotional amnesia of it where you do remember the events of what happened, but you cannot remember the emotional information of that event. As in, yeah, this happened to me, I was crying, but I don't really feel sad about it or feel any particular emotions about it whenever I think about it. That is emotional amnesia. unless you've healed from it and that's why you don't feel any emotions. And I definitely think that emotional amnesia and lack of emotional object permanence have connection to each other. So if you are what they call an OSDD1B system, where your alters have separate identities, however, there is no memory amnesia, but there's only emotional amnesia, then you can probably think lack of emotional object permanence in childhood for that, even though that's also going to be present in systems that do have amnesia as well. But yeah, basically, I've just been thinking about that recently, and I needed to make a video, and this was the perfect opportunity to get this one out, because yeah, this is what this channel is for. I want to make videos that are productive and furthering our thinking about this disorder, instead of just falling into the usual shit about like systems online that are doing this controversial thing. I feels like you can't bring up DID in a conversation with someone that is just normal and uses the internet normally, like 35 years old and below, without them saying, oh yeah, DID. Don't you hate how many people fake that online? It's so annoying. So I just wanted to actually make it into more complex thinking about it, because if I bring up ADHD or autism or OCD or something like that, of course there's a lot more conversation around these disorders in general, so there's going to be a lot more to say in every regard, but there is definitely far more discussion of the clinical aspects and the experiences of people with it and how wide-ranging those can be. Whereas with DID, like, no one is talking about it like that at all, except for professionals and some people in the community itself. But even then, a lot of people in the community itself aren't talking about it either. And I think that's partially because the disorder itself is so mysterious to us, as well as the nature of this disorder tends to be. But I think that understanding it more in a clinical or just developmental sense can help us heal from it and understand it more and understand our alters or parts more. So I encourage you all to contribute to that conversation down below, because that's what this channel is for. Tell me thoughts that you've had about DID that you haven't really seen anyone else expressing, any sort of things you've been wondering about, or if anything in this video you have an opinion on it or anything to comment on regarding it. I would love to hear it. I love hearing what you guys have to say so much. I say it like every video, but I really do. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video hopefully soon. I'm going to start trying to make them regularly again. It was just, God, it was such a busy few months, but hopefully it's going to be less. So thank you.